modern is to be relevant in some cases, right? And that's what the Supreme Court held back in 1900.
And it is supposed to be part of our law, but where it breaks down is what that means. So does that mean that any law that's part of a treaty somehow gets incorporated into the statute books of the United States? No.
So this, I think you've basically already talked, you've begun to talk about these particular tribunals, but I wonder if you could use, and I know I left some out that we're going to add in the amended outline, but could you just, again, stepping back, tell us about these criminal tribunals,
these many
Yugoslavia,
tribunals.
Rwanda, and then you mentioned the International Criminal Court. And I guess you can see the questions that I wanted to ask you about, and that we talked about earlier. First of all, what are they trying to do? Have they been successful in doing it? What's wrong with the way they do? And does that, the fact that they haven't worked in the millions of words been spent on, say, the former Yugoslavia and not much payout, does that mean just, in your view, abandoning the whole thing? Or where do we stand, I guess, is broad.
Okay. Do you want to take questions as we go, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Was there a hand back here?
What was the Havana Treaty?
It's called the Paquette Habana.
Yeah.
And what is it about? Yeah. To be honest, I'm not going to be able to give you a good description of what it's about, because that holding has been sort of so separated from the facts. It was had to do with a boat. I can tell you that much.
I know nothing about current law, but I got the back.
Yeah.
The U.S. captured 2 fishing boats.
Okay.
Just before the Spanish-American War, and they took the fishing boats and wanted to sell them in Florida or somewhere.
Okay.
And the owners of the fishing boats said you can't do that because customary international law. And the United States said we're going to do that because these fishermen were really good sailors and they could potentially be arms against us. And the owners of the boats said, no, international customary law says fishing boats are exempted from.
Right.
We thought of as warships and distinguish fishermen from being potential sailors, and you can't do that. And apparently, the Supreme Court, as I understand, the Supreme Court overruled the general who captured the boats and said you got to give the boats back. Roughly speaking.
Right.
And the basis was customary international
Right.
law. That's all I wanted to.
Thank you.
I wanted to the fishermen. I mean, the customary.
I'm just remembering the boats.
So it had to do this work. I was only put it up there. It's always given for the layperson as the beginning of someone says customary international law has some bearing on U.S. law.
And that's where it started. Yeah. It's not that it means nothing. There are just lots of different places to pull at that law.
Is that okay?
All right.
That's all I know. I don't know what happens the next 100 years is not my department. I'm a historian. So is it okay to go back to this particular case?
Good.
Yes.
All right, so the tribunals themselves, this is a list of some of them. So international criminal tribunals didn't have much activity between Nuremberg and some of the other post-World War II tribunals. So there were separate Nuremberg tribunals. There was a Tokyo tribunal for crimes in the Far East during that time. And then we didn't have a lot of activity until the 80s, and then a real explosion of activity in the 90s. And this started with the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, for Rwanda, and then we have the International Criminal Court. And then we also have a number of other bodies that are sort of mixed international, national hybrid tribunals. So we have some bodies in Rwanda that are sort of community-based tribunals. There's a special court for Sierra Leone that's something of a hybrid court. It has UN backing, but it has some national judges in addition to international judges. It's local rather than being housed in The Hague. There are special panels for serious crimes committed in East Timor. That's kind of a joint venture between the government and the United Nations. Extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia, another joint venture between the government of Cambodia and the United Nations. So why do we have all of... No, so that was just the International Criminal Court working in Darfur, and I was working for a U.S. office that was working on there. So there we have the International Criminal Court covering lots of different situations. So there it's covering a situation in Darfur, Kenya, Democratic Republic of Congo. Now we have Libya investigations going forward. So the International Criminal Court has a wide range of cases before it. So why do we have all of these different tribunals? What are they trying to do? They're trying to do a lot of different things. So the first on the list might be ending impunity. So this is a phrase that often accompanies sort of the declaration of intentions in the preamble to any of these statutes, right? So after years of letting tyrants go free, we're going to establish the rule of law. We're going to make these people pay for what they have done. We're going to have justice at last. So ending impunity might be the first thing. Second, we're going to tell some sort of truth about what happened. So we're not going to let people deny that the Holocaust ever happened. We're not going to let people like Milosevic spread stories about why the crimes in the former Yugoslavia happened, what that conflict was about. We're going to tell the truth through these tribunals about what happened in these places, and we're going to tell it right. We're going to tell it through some impartial, unbiased account. Third, and I'm putting this third on the list because I don't really think it's a primary goal, but one of the goals is to judge guilt of accused persons. So take individuals, determine what crimes they've committed, and then call them guilty or innocent. So no different from any criminal court in the state of California. That's all we're looking at, is just talking about the individual people. Then we have some other much broader goals too, like reconciliation. That's often a goal that's identified. So in places like the former Yugoslavia, where conflict is seen to stretch back for generations, where there are different identities that seem to be at work and in conflict during these wars, finding some way to move forward rather than letting those old hatreds fester, and also finding some way to present the state, the government, as some sort of clean body again. So when the government has sponsored mass killings or mass atrocities, there has to be some marker that that period is over and that the state can move on, that society can move on. Those are some of the goals.
So I guess the next thing we put up when we discussed this is, and you hinted this a little bit, that you think it wasn't very successful, we're just finding out whether they did it or not, but would you know, if you weren't Charlie Rose, would you say, this is the lay public, is this successful?
Probably not successful in these goals. So we have up here first that it's not a good way to determine individual guilt or innocence. So on an individual level, what we've seen in these tribunals is that we're not really getting great answers for what particular individuals did at what time and when. So the tribunals are pretty good at sort of establishing a vague sense of responsibility for some crimes. So we know that some person probably did something around some time, but the methods of fact-finding are really flawed. There are just vast inconsistencies between different witnesses, and those are generally papered over so that these courts can reach verdicts on individuals. So as an individual matter, we're not getting great answers. We're not getting answers that would probably stand up in a court that we would want to see determining guilt or innocence in California.
You guys asked what you should have, but so you're saying that, let's say, trying Vlade or Tarjic or these races got Yugoslavia, you kind of know that they had to be involved in some way, but you don't know that they actually signed the order or they
Right. Yeah, so
smoking gun, so to speak.
there's no smoking gun. I mean, in the German project of genocide in World War II was really remarkable because they documented everything. I mean, everything was on paper. And so the Nuremberg tribunals actually were very rigorous in establishing facts and in getting proof for those facts. And people don't really do that anymore, right? They know better. So my experience with the government of Sudan was that they're very clever, and the president and vice presidents are very cognizant of this threat of prosecution. So they're not writing anything down, and yet we all know what they're doing. And even with lower level officials, the problem isn't so much finding an order that they signed, but establishing that it was on Tuesday that they were participating in a massacre on a church when 10 different witnesses say, no, it was Thursday or it was 2 years ago rather than 1 year ago. And some of this might just have to do with sort of cultural factors, a lack of fixation on dates that is it's very Western, it's very American, and it's not necessarily matched in other societies. So individual guilt and innocence is not going so well at the tribunals. I didn't talk about deterrence as a purpose, and I should have, but that's one of the aims. So if we try these individuals for what they've done, then that might deter others from starting these wars, from committing these atrocities. And that has not proven to be so successful. We obviously still have massive atrocities taking place. I'm actually more optimistic about the deterrent, I think, than other people are, just because of my experience with the government of Sudan, where I think they actually cleaned up their act after the International Criminal Court indictments came down. I think they don't want to go to jail. And so they're not completely law-abiding citizens at this point, but they're trying to sort of get out of the public eye to the extent that they can, and to the extent that committing those crimes is no longer really of value or interest to them. And the history lesson point, we have a lot of concerns, I think, rightly, about what kind of history the tribunals are telling. So the idea of an impartial history might just be a fantasy, because these tribunals are a part of that history. And they're aiming for a particular type of history that's going to be told. So we're not going to get an impartial history lesson. We also probably aren't going to get a complete one, just because of the nature of criminal trials. So they are adversarial processes. An accused person is going to sit in the defendant's chair, and